Two strangers, 36 questions, 4 minutes of silent eye contact. That's it. That's the whole experiment. And yet it became one of the most talked about studies in the history of psychology, because it hinted at something we don't like to admit. Falling in love might not be as random as it feels. By the end of this video, you'll understand the real psychology behind why we fall for certain people, why timing matters more than we think, and why the person who feels like fireworks is sometimes the worst match, and the one who feels calm is sometimes the best. Falling in love isn't just magic or fate. Psychology suggests there are surprisingly predictable patterns underneath it. Let's break them down. Here's an uncomfortable truth. Love has less to do with destiny and more to do with geography. Psychologists call it the mere exposure effect. The more we see someone, the more our brain quietly decides it likes them, even when nothing about that person has changed. It's why office romances happen so often, why people fall for a friend already sitting in their group chat, why college roommates end up dating years later. Think about the quiet coworker you barely noticed on your first day at a new job. 6 months later, they seem sharper, funnier, more interesting. Even though they haven't changed at all, what changed is you. Repeated exposure rewired how your brain reads them. There's real research behind this. One classic study looked at police academy trainees who were seated alphabetically in class. Months later, the closest friendships weren't formed by shared hobbies or personality, they were formed by who sat next to whom. Proximity, not compatibility, predicted the bond. Your brain runs on a simple shortcut. Familiar equals safe, and safe feels good. That's step one. Proximity doesn't cause love, but it opens the door for it. What happens once that door is open depends on something much deeper. You've probably heard that opposites attract. Psychology says mostly not true. Decades of relationship research show that similarity, in values, humor, communication style, and life goals predicts long-term attraction far better than difference does. We're drawn to people who reflect our own worldview back at us because being understood feels like being safe. But here's the twist that makes this more interesting. While similarity builds comfort, a little unpredictability builds intensity. This comes down to something called intermittent reinforcement, the same psychological mechanism that makes slot machines addictive. When someone is warm and caring, but not entirely predictable, the brain releases more dopamine trying to figure them out. Too much unpredictability, and it reads as instability. Too little, and it reads as boring. Have you ever mistaken that dopamine spike, that anxious can't stop checking your phone feeling, for love? A lot of people do. That feeling is often just uncertainty, not connection. The actual sweet spot is consistent character with unpredictable charm. You know exactly who someone is. You just don't always know what they'll say next. Now let's go back to where we started. In 1997, psychologist Arthur Aaron designed an experiment to test something simple. Could structured self-disclosure create closeness between two total strangers faster than it would happen naturally? Pairs of participants took turns asking each other 36 increasingly personal questions, then sat in silence, making eye contact for 4 full minutes. To be clear, this wasn't a magic formula for falling in love, and it wasn't designed to produce couples, but several participants reported forming unusually close, lasting connections afterward, which is exactly why the study became so famous. It revealed something real about how emotional closeness actually forms. Aaron called it the fast friends procedure, and the mechanism behind it is self-disclosure. Love isn't built on small talk. It's built on sharing something real, a fear, a memory, an insecurity, and having the other person respond with care instead of judgment. When that happens, both people get a small hit of oxytocin, the brain's bonding chemical, and disclosure is reciprocal. When one person opens up, the other feels an almost automatic pull to match it. That's why a 2-hour conversation at 1 a.m. can create more closeness than 5 ordinary dates. Vulnerability isn't a weakness in attraction, it's the mechanism. Picture it as a scene, 2 strangers sitting across from each other, question by question, the space between them getting smaller. Not because they moved, but because they kept telling each other the truth. Now, let's get into the chemicals, because this is where it gets wild. Anthropologist Helen Fisher scanned the brains of people who had recently fallen in love and found 3 distinct systems firing, often at the same time but on different timelines. Lust, driven mainly by testosterone, and estrogen. This is pure physical drive, and it's the fastest system to switch on. Attraction, driven by dopamine, norepinephrine, and a drop in serotonin. This is the obsessive, can't stop thinking about them phase. It genuinely mirrors the brain activity seen in obsessive compulsive disorder, which is part of why new love can feel less like happiness and more like mild mania. Attachment, driven by oxytocin and vasopressin. This is the slower, quieter system responsible for long-term bonding and for the feeling of calm safety with a partner. Here's the part almost nobody talks about. The obsessive early stage isn't built to last. Most research suggests it naturally fades somewhere between 12 and 18 months because the brain simply can't sustain that level of dopamine indefinitely. The couples who make it long-term aren't the ones who keep that original spark burning forever. They're the ones who successfully shift from stage 2 into stage 3 from obsession into secure attachment. That's not the relationship dying down. That's the relationship working exactly as it's supposed to. If you've ever wondered why you keep being drawn to emotionally unavailable people, or why you panic the moment someone gets close, this is attachment theory, and it usually traces back further than your dating history. Psychologists describe roughly 4 patterns shaped in early childhood by how consistently our caregivers responded to our needs: secure, comfortable with both closeness and independence; anxious, craves closeness, fears abandonment, and tends to read neutral behavior, like a slow text reply, as a sign of rejection; avoidant, values independence so strongly that closeness can start to feel like a threat; disorganized, wants closeness and fears it at the same time, often pulling toward and away from the same person. Here's the pattern researchers keep finding. Anxious and avoidant people are frequently drawn to each other. The anxious partner pursues, the avoidant partner pulls back, and that push-pull becomes a familiar, if painful, cycle. Remember, to the brain, familiar equals safe, even when the relationship doesn't feel good at all. Understanding your own attachment style may be the single most useful piece of relationship psychology there is, because it explains why certain people feel like fireworks, and why boring sometimes just means healthy. Last piece of the puzzle, and it's the one people ignore the most: readiness. Research on relationship timing consistently shows we're more likely to fall for someone when we're already in a state of mild arousal or heightened emotion, adrenaline, novelty, even nervousness. This is called misattribution of arousal, and it was demonstrated in a well-known experiment where people crossing a frightening, swaying suspension bridge rated a stranger they met afterward as more attractive than people who crossed a low, stable bridge. Same stranger, same conversation, different heart rate, different result. The brain had mislabeled fear as attraction, but readiness isn't only physiological, it's also about life stage. Someone who feels emotionally settled, isn't in survival mode, and is genuinely open to connection will fall in love faster and more securely than someone distracted by stress, unresolved grief, or uncertainty about what they actually want. Timing doesn't guarantee love, but the wrong timing can quietly block it, no matter how strong the chemistry feels. So, what actually makes someone fall in love? Proximity opens the door. Similarity builds comfort. A touch of unpredictability builds intensity. Vulnerability builds real connection. Brain chemistry drives the early obsession, and attachment is what's left standing once that fades. Your attachment style quietly decides who you're even drawn to in the first place. And timing determines whether any of it has room to grow at all. The biggest surprise in all of this, love isn't something that simply happens to us. Our brains are constantly weighing familiarity, trust, emotion, timing, and biology, often without us noticing any of it. The better you understand those patterns, the better you'll understand your own relationships, past and present. If this changed the way you think about love, hit subscribe, because next week I'm breaking down why some couples repeat the exact same fight for years and the psychology behind finally breaking the cycle.